This conference will now be recorded.
I'd like to call the Village of Ashwaubenon's Public Works and Protection meeting on Tuesday, May 2, 2023. Roll call, please.
Terry Paul,
Here.
Kelly Service,
Here.
Jay Krieger,
Here.
John Euclid, here, and John Burnett.
Here.
Let's all stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Action on the agenda. Any changes or corrections?
Move to approve.
Second.
Got a first and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Number 5, minutes. Action on the minutes from April 5th, 2023.
Move to approve. Second.
Move first and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Okay, comments from the public. Must be limited to the items not on the agenda. Must state your name and address when you come up to the microphones here. Limit to 5 minutes in your discussion. Board rules to listen, not to discuss the item that you bring up. Personnel issues cannot be discussed nor individual named. Board is not able to take action at this meeting. We got a group of people here tonight. Anybody here that is not on the agenda? Everybody here is for the other reason. Once again, anybody that wants to speak that is not on the agenda. If not, we'll move on. Action items. Action A, action on temporary premise change for Boomerang Management Incorporated, doing business as Epic Event Center. Chris, you are the lady at the moment for this.
Thank you. The Epic Event Center is having a Summer Bash 2023 on July 30th from 11 to 6, and they're asking for their liquor license premise description to be extended into the parking lot during that time. They also have a special event application in, and that has been approved by Public Safety. So we're just waiting on this premise extension approval.
Okay, I believe we've done that last year for them also.
Correct. And Jessica is in the audience if you have any questions.
Safety Department have any problems?
They didn't say they did.
Nothing, nothing, okay. Okay, any questions?
Is the area going to be fenced, I'm assuming, all the way around? Okay, that'd be my only concern.
Okay.
Having none, I would move to approve.
Okay. Motion and a second, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Item B. Action on Class A beer / CA alcohol liquor license required for Kohler Company doing business as Lodge Kohler. Chris, again.
So Lodge Kohler already has a Class B beer, Class B liquor license, but they now have a micro market. So it's like a little sundry store. And they need a different license for that. So that's why they're requesting the Class A beer, Class A liquor license. I know they are going to, oh, there they are, thank you. They're in the audience if you have any questions.
Okay, anybody up here have any questions? Chris, everything is in proper order for that?
Yes.
All right, all bills paid, whatever else
Yes.
the requirements are. Any other questions?
Do we have a limit of how many of those licenses we have?
I'm sorry.
Is there a limit?
There's a municipal quota on the Class A liquor portion, and which is 16, and we're getting close to that limit. But we're finding that a lot of the hotels need this for their little markets.
Mm-hmm.
But that doesn't take this one doesn't take one of those licenses, right? This is B, you said?
This is A, so this does take one of them, and then there's another one on the agenda, yes.
Okay,
And as Chris had stated, that is a municipal quota, so it's somewhat self-imposed by the village.
gotcha.
So if the village wishes to amend an ordinance increasing the quota for the Class A liquor, you are able to do that. You aren't limited under statutes like you would be on a Class B reserve license.
So with this one, Chris, how many have applied for this then? We have a total of 16. What's the number before we get to the next one?
We had just approved, you had just approved one last week. That was number 11. This will be 12, and the next one will be 13.
Next
So
one.
we'll have 3 left.
All right. Next one will be 13. Okay.
I'll move to approve.
Second.
First and a second, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, motion carried. Okay, item C, action on Class A beer / Class A liquor license request for Green Bay Hotel LLC, doing it as a Residence Inn at Marriott. I believe, Chris, you are the lady again.
Yes, this, and this is the same, same thing. They have what they call the market. And so for them to be able to sell the closed containers in that market, they need the Class A beer, Class A liquor.
Can you just explain that a little bit?
Sure. So they have the Class B beer for their lobby, the meeting areas, the guest rooms, and the courtyard. But then they have this little market, which, you know, they have sell soda, and now they want to sell beer and liquor that's sealed. So that has to be, that's a separate license. That's what we call away, where the B is on premise. This is you buy it and you walk away.
This is like a little store they have off to the side that
Correct.
sell anything and liquor.
Yes, so there, it's a specific premise, not included in the B.
Okay. Okay, understanding. Okay,
I'll move to approve.
Second.
all right, we got a first and a second on this, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Okay, Chris, again, action on 23-24 retail liquor license renewals.
This is renewal time for liquor licenses, and they were due April 15th. So this is the list that I have so far of all the establishments in Ashwaubenon that have turned their paperwork in.
Now, everybody has met the requirements that they're supposed to in order to get these licenses?
There's a couple that might have a debt, but it wasn't due yet, so I'll watch that to make sure it's paid for before we issue.
Okay.
And that's why, if you look under recommendation, the motion states that.
No, I'm looking at, I don't see the recommendation.
It's a motion to approve the 2023-2024 retail alcohol license renewals contingent upon all paperwork and corresponding fees.
Okay, I got you.
Okay.
Looking at the wrong one here. Okay. Thanks, yeah. Okay, understanding. All right, any other questions?
I'll make the motion to approve the 2023-2024 retail alcohol license renewals contingent upon all paperwork and corresponding fees have been received and filed according, and all outstanding indebtedness to the Village of Ashwaubenon has been paid in full.
Second.
Got a first and a second, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Okay, on to the big one. Action regarding proposed ordinance amendment regarding short-term rentals. Joel, you want to take this for the lead off?
Yes, thank you, Gary. I'll take the initial lead, and I'm sure other staff will be able to jump in. Prior to getting into the kind of discussion and deliberation over proposed ordinance, wanted to take a moment just to kind of rehash and review kind of where we are at to date with action or work on this particular item of discussion. So the proposed ordinance that you have before you tonight is in relation to regulating short-term rentals here in the village of Ashwaubenon. This effort was initiated a few months back with requests and desires from members of the village board to staff, to which point staff had notified licensees, current licensees of short-term rentals, that there are being considerations made for amendments to our short-term rental license. Notification went out to each of those licensees prior to last month's meeting, to which point the item was presented to this committee for consideration. From this committee, it was desired that this item be postponed until a future meeting, and that efforts be made to notify area residents that may not necessarily be licensed as a short-term rental, but may be impacted because of the proximity or location of those short-term rentals in relation to their neighborhoods. So notification did go back out to the licensed holders of short-term rentals, indicating that action has been postponed, that the village board would not take this item up at their meeting in April. And as a result, it would come back before this committee. In addition to that, notifications did go out to property owners, predominantly in the wards where the highest concentration of short-term rentals are found. They did not go to every village resident, but there was a substantial number of properties that were provided notification. It's our understanding that trustees and the village president did go out, knock on quite a few doors as well, and solicited feedback from the general public as it related to short-term rentals. To which point those trustees and members of the committee had provided feedback to us as staff to present some opportunities for alternatives to the discussion that was had last month at this committee. So to date, no action has been made. This is really kind of your opportunity as a committee to work through the language, develop a formal recommendation, then ultimately forward that recommendation to the village board, at which point a public hearing would be held, and then the board may consider an amendment to the ordinance based on that recommendation. So quickly, just to review, Wisconsin state statutes limit political subdivisions of the state, such as cities, towns, villages, and counties, as to what it can prohibit as it relates to short-term rentals. So under Wisconsin state statutes and general municipal law, municipalities like the village of Ashwaubenon are prohibited or may prohibit rentals for less than 7 consecutive days. So anything less than 7 consecutive days we can prohibit. However, we are not able to prohibit rentals between 7 and 29 days. In addition to that, the law states that municipalities can limit total consecutive days that short-term rentals can rent to a minimum 180-day rental period, and that may be done consecutively as well. It can allow for municipalities to require a local permit. And then the statute also provides an opportunity for municipalities to implement additional regulations that are not inconsistent with the statute. So it sounds like a double negative, but it allows you to institute regulations so long as it's compatible with the statutory provisions of between 7 and 29 days, no less than 180-day consecutive period, and that rentals of 10 nights or fewer are unregulated by a municipality. Last month, part of the proposed amendments for Chapter 6 Businesses, Article 13, again, this is related to the licensing of short-term rentals. The proposed amendment that was discussed would prohibit rentals for less than 7 consecutive days, specifically for licensed premises that are single and two-family dwelling units. So multifamily units or multifamily condominium developments, things of that nature, would not have the same restriction. It would just be, if you will, single-family homes or maybe duplexes, two-family dwelling units. In addition to that, the proposed amendment would limit the total number of days that short-term rentals could rent to a 180-day consecutive period. So under the current ordinance, we do limit it to no more than 180 days over a licensing period. However, it was not listed as consecutive. So what this essentially means is that once the first rental is established for that licensing period, they essentially have 180 days from that period to fulfill their rentals. After the 180-day consecutive period is ended, they no longer can accept rentals for the remainder of that licensing period. The proposed amendment continues to require a local permit for any short-term rentals who rent more than 10 nights in a year. That was a question that came up last meeting, where we had an individual that rented their home. It's an owner-occupied home. They rented it maybe a couple weekends out of the year. It equated to maybe 6 nights over the course of that year. Would they be required to have a license or permit issued by the Village of Ashwaubenon? And the answer to that is no. And statutes do not allow us to permit or regulate or license those types of rentals. Furthermore, the proposed amendment adds additional building regulations, specifically requiring ground fault circuit interrupters in specific locations in these homes where you would typically find them as required under building code. Bathrooms, kitchens, things of that nature. And then just to be clear and transparent, it does remove the licensing fees from the ordinance and places those fees specifically within the village's adopted fee schedule. And we've been doing that periodically as ordinance has been amended, because it becomes easier to adjust your fee schedules annually versus going through a formal ordinance amendment. Now, from that meeting, again, there was a direction from the committee to go out and seek additional information from residents that may be impacted, including the short-term license holders. And so the village staff, along with elected officials and committee members, have been fielding emails, correspondence, things of that nature over the last month as it relates to this topic. Anything that was provided to staff has been included in your packet. Primarily from licensees. I believe Mary, our village president, also received some additional correspondence, and will be able to provide that to you as well if it's not already at the dais. But from that, some additional alternatives were suggested that we are presenting to you tonight for consideration and discussion. First and foremost, there was a conversation at the last meeting about the intent and purpose of why we are proposing this amendment. And one of the main reasons that was described at the meeting was to maintain and preserve the existing familial housing in these predominantly single and two-family residential districts. And so that additional language, as underlined here, is proposed to go into the purpose section of the ordinance. The other component that was discussed at committee and had been suggested post-committee from a variety of individuals was two components. One was this idea of grandfathering certain license holders for a period of time or in perpetuity if they had a license previous to this possible amendment. Okay, so any new licensees would be bound by the 7 consecutive day restriction, but any existing licensees would be grandfathered, if you will. So the proposed alternative language here would allow for that grandfathering, if you will. So any new licensee would need to meet that 7 consecutive day or 6 night minimum in order to comply with the ordinance. However, under what's shown on the screen here and in your packet under subparagraph A, any short-term rental licensees, again, for a single-family or two-family home of record, so they're of record of licensure, and are in good standing during this current licensing period for a period of 1 year or until July 1 of 2024, so that would give you a full licensing period, shall be exempt from that 6 night minimum. Now, this provision would be void if the license is not renewed at this upcoming licensing period. It would be void if there was a change in ownership or sale of the property or transfer of that dwelling unit. Essentially what that is doing is, there was a comment at the last meeting saying, well, we're already renting our unit for 3 nights starting in August or September of this coming year. And what should we do with those existing contracts? Being that if you change this ordinance and it goes into effect July 1, 2023, then what? This provision that's in here gives those rental units, those short-term rentals, 1 year to get into compliance with the 6-night minimum. So any of those existing rentals that they've booked gives them that grace period, if you will, so that by next licensing period, they now have to comply with that 6-night minimum. The other component that was discussed at committee, and I think as members of the public had approached members of the committee and board, is this idea of owner-occupied dwelling units to maintain that kind of familial setting within the community. And so subparagraph B here does provide that as well. So this would be an exemption or an exception to the 6-night minimum. So an owner-occupied dwelling unit that has been approved by the village would be exempt from that 6-night minimum. Owners have to apply for that, and it has to get approved. And you might ask, well, what does that mean for an owner-occupied unit? And so we would have to add some additional definitions within the ordinance that would apply to that specific circumstance. So an owner-occupied unit would be a residential property that is occupied by an individual who has an ownership interest in the property and uses the property as the individual's primary residence. Primary residence being defined as a residential property where the property owner resides and maintains their full-time residence, and to which, whenever absent from that property, tends to return, okay? Additional characteristics of that would be not limited to, but could include where an individual receives their mail, claims their residence for voter registration purposes, for tax returns, pays the utility bills directly, lists that property potentially on their state-issued ID cards, things of that nature. And again, an individual can have only one primary residence. From a compliance standpoint, we would be expecting, based on the language of this code, that an individual applying for a short-term rental license with an owner-occupied exception would need to show and prove as part of their license application that that is indeed their primary residence. So they couldn't just claim it and then do it without an approval from the village indicating that they've met the exception requirements under the code. The other thing that I'll mention too that was discussed at the last meeting was in relation to compliance and enforcement. From a staff's perspective, we feel that adding an additional regulation within the code that requires routine reporting by licensed short-term rental units will aid staff's ability to regulate, enforce, and maintain compliance with the code. So at present, although not found under Chapter 6, short-term rental licensees are required under Section 9, Article 1, Chapter 8, to maintain a registry of guests. So that's required for all hotels, motels, short-term rentals currently within the code. So that's no change. Where the change comes in is that we specifically cite that as reference within this proposed alternative language, and that the owner of the short-term rental dwelling unit should submit or shall submit a report to the village every 90 days from the registration of that first 180-day period, indicating the name of the individual who rented the unit, the number of guests, and the date and time of check-in and check-out for each rental period. So that information is found on the registry. The registry under Chapter 9, does require some additional information to maintain compliance with that section. For reporting under Chapter 6, much of that information is not included. We're simply looking for guests, number of guests, the individual who rented it, and the dates of that rental period. And where we find that important is it helps us comply or helps us maintain compliance with the 180-day period, and it helps us verify that an individual has indeed rented it for that 6 consecutive nights. So with that, those are kind of the proposed alternatives that were presented to us leading up to this meeting. As I stated before, this is your opportunity as a committee to kind of work through language, discuss components of the alternatives, so long as they maintain compliance with what we are allowed to do from statute. From there, if the committee is comfortable with the language in which it would like to recommend, this item would get forwarded to the village board at some point, at which point a public hearing would be held then on that proposed language. As a reminder again, the licensing period does end June 30th of this year. Part of the effort through this, to this point, has been to attempt to, if any amendments or changes to the ordinance are made, they're done so that it would align with that licensing period starting July 1. So with that, I'll answer any questions. I know Patrick and Aaron have worked pretty extensively on this effort in this process, so they'll be happy to answer any questions as well.
Okay, do we have any questions on the committee here?
I have a quick one on compliance. So after the 180 days, what are our thoughts about, are people going to go check and see if it's still being rented after the 180th day? Or is that just going to be driven by complaints, or how is that going to work?
Yeah, I think some of the devil is in the details as it relates to enforcement, but there is certainly a possibility that a variety of tools and mechanisms can be put into place. Obviously, with the reporting requirement, that provides some impetus to us as to when that 180-day clock starts, when it ends. So now we have a concrete and linear area that we would then be able to inspect from. In addition to that, we've had some conversations about maybe setting up some hotlines or special reporting mechanisms on the village's website. So if residents are in fact concerned about a property maybe being rented for fewer than 6 consecutive nights or more than 180 consecutive days, they could report that to the village. And then at that point, we can provide the inspection for that property.
Additionally, are they going to be able to maybe download pictures or videos and things like that as well?
Correct. So that web reporting tool has the capability of download or uploading, I should say, some type of multimedia file, whether it be picture, video, something to that effect. Gotcha. That would help assist in the enforcement of the code.
Okay.
And stuff like that is secured, so that's just between the person and the village here.
It's probably a better question for Patrick, but it's my understanding that if somebody were to submit something that in fact would be subject to an open records request, and that information that's submitted would be subject to that.
Right, there's not too much to add. What Joel said on that, certainly subject to redaction or any kind of private information could be redacted prior to being released. But upon request, that would be releasable if anything is submitted to the village. Okay. Videos, pictures.
Okay, just so the people understand.
Right. I got a question for Aaron. Other municipalities in the area have been adding different ordinances like this. How similar to this is to other ordinances that are being done, like in Sebastopol? I know DePere just did one recently.
It's probably most similar to the one that was adopted in Sebastopol in Door County, just north of Sturgeon Bay, in terms of the owner occupancy requirement. So that's probably the most similar.
Okay.
Anybody else? Okay, there's a lot of people here tonight. The last meeting we had, I opened the floor up for 40 minutes. Tonight, I'm going to open it up for 30 minutes. We have the pros and the cons, so we're going to give 15 minutes to the pros and 15 minutes to the people that are kind of against it. So the people that have talked last month, I prefer you not to talk because we've got you on record on already what you've talked about. So if somebody will, Joel?
Okay. I think you're on the correct path to suspend the rules and open the floor.
Okay. If somebody wants to make the motion to open the floor, let's open it up and listen to the cons of this first to see where we're going to go with this. So.
I think the one comment I just want to make to everybody in the audience, it isn't just the feedback here. We have received hundreds of emails on both sides. So, but we really do want to open the floor to hear whatever you might have to say too. So yeah, I would make the motion to open the floor.
Okay, we got a first. Joanne, you want a second?
Sure.
All right, we got a first and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carried. Okay, anybody coming up, please state your name and address, speak into the microphone so we can understand you. If not, go. Be the first.
Okay, Rick Rice, 465 Oak Lawn. I live in the old part of Ashwaubenon over there.
Historical.
Historical, there you go. We used to be called a depressed area. Not anymore. The biggest issue we've got by us is we have a house. The guy who owns it lives in Florida. Every weekend, last year wasn't bad, but every single weekend when he's here, nothing but trouble. Nothing but trouble. Porta potties in the front yard, bands in the backyard, 3 o'clock in the morning, car horns going off, alarms going off, call public safety by the time they get there. I mean, and it's just to the point where when he rents it out to regular people, there's guys come over there, put their boats in the yard, they go fishing, you don't even know they're there. But when the owner and his crew comes, it's nothing but trouble. I know years ago when Mary was our rep and Mike was the president, they were there. We talked about it. I don't know how many years ago that was. I'll go back 7, 8, maybe 9 years. The house is maybe 900 square feet, and sometimes there's 11, 12 people staying there. So there's no egress windows, electrical. I don't know about that. I haven't been in a house in 10 years. But they turn our neighborhood into just yelling and screaming and just not, and we're all getting old. I'm almost 74 years old. The days of dropping the, way it used to be, you can't do that anymore. And it's an issue. And a lot of the neighbors don't want to get involved, but it's not a good thing over there. And I was just told the other day, there's also one opening up on Morris, and there's also one down on Broadway. Those I don't have any issues with because they don't affect me yet. But when it's 2 doors over from you and the neighbor's got a porta potty 4 feet from their bedroom window, that's an issue. And like I say, I knew this was going to come when this first started happening. It was going to be issues because Gary, me and you, we talked about this years ago. And that's all I got to say. So, right or wrong.
Rick, question I want to ask you. I know the neighborhood you live in. I used to live there myself. Are there a number of homes in that particular area?
You mean
That are short-term rentals?
just on our
that
street?
you know of?
There's only the one.
Okay. But you mentioned Broadway and another one.
Well, I think with the old liquor store. Yeah, well, it's got a sign right out in front that says B&B, somebody's whatever. So that I don't know who owns it. I like I say, no issues with that one, but that one by us. And like I said, the guy, he lives in Florida.
Okay.
So the only occupancy thing is.
Do we know if the one that you're talking about is licensed?
Well, that's the other thing I was just going to bring up. We don't even know if it's licensed.
I think the village can answer that for you if we look in. We do police that, so we could answer that for you.
Okay. But that's all I got. Like I say, I want to go back to being old and sitting on my front porch and not having to listen to bong, bong, bong. I mean, 40 years ago I would have been over there. So that's all I got.
All right, thanks, Rick. Okay, anybody against? Come on, Mary.
There's a lot of legalese up there that,
I'm going to pull the mic to you, Mary. Name and address for the records.
is that better? I am Mary Lemerond. I live at 2125 Kasner Drive. I'm here at the request of Madam President. Our family's been here 50 years, and the other day I saw a little map, courtesy of the Green Bay Press Gazette on my phone, with little blue circles on it. I was shocked. When these party houses, I'll call them, were going up, I thought they were going to be on, across Lombardi and maybe a few on Stadium Drive. But every time I go up Morris Avenue today, I saw 3 more. There's one in back of Ace Hardware, and there's a lot of empty house. They're not being lived in, and I guess I have a couple points here. Ashwaubenon has asked for millions in the last school referendum, and it passed, but there aren't any kids there anymore. There are no families living in these houses. There's no children in them. And yet Ashwaubenon keeps asking for more school taxes and whatever. My second point is, we've always been a neighborhood, like I say, I've been here 50 years, but all the small businesses are leaving. I realize villages have to grow. I know that. But some of this, the new hotels and condos that are going up, every time I look outside my kitchen window, there's a new hotel going up. They're very unavailable, very unaffordable. There's numerous hotels and apartments and/or condos being constructed. And I'm told they're there because a lot of people are retiring from their home in Ashwaubenon and they want to stay in the village. And there's no place to live anymore except in those. And I just disagree. They are not affordable. Just this evening, I was talking to my nephew. He doesn't live here. He knows 5 people who have been, who live in the condos over by the Shell station up on Lombardy. They were each $500,000. And they love it here. But the average person cannot afford that. How affordable are these new apartments and condos in my neighborhood if we want to sell our house and live here? Like I said, we've been here 50 years. If someone offers me double or triple for my property value, what should I do? Should I sell it, or should I pay the higher rent in one of these buildings across the way? If you elect to put in a 6-night rule, I think it could backfire on Ashwaubenon. All of a sudden, you're going to have empty party houses like we do now that no one wants to rent, and the price is too high for 6 nights. I talked to 3 of my neighbors, and they all said, well, on the other side, if you're going to charge 6 nights, the guys that come to these Packer games and use these houses, they'll just split that up. No problem. And I have to say that the homes that were sold and remodeled, they look nice, but they're empty. The ones I see, there's no curtains up, there's nobody there, and I drive around the neighborhood looking. It could be and probably will be out of reach for retirees and the general public to visit and stay in these rentals. And, I never did see a referendum. If there had to be one for us, I vote all the time, and I've never seen a referendum saying, we're going to let these owners sell their homes and put up condos and party houses. And some of these houses are, they're magnificent and they're empty. And it kind of bothers me. And, it started, Mr. Steffen voted for this in Madison. Of course, it's your house, you want to rent it out? Sure, go ahead. Did you ever go to Wrigley Field and look at the property, or to a stadium in Madison, the Badger Field, the houses around there? Did you ever fly into New York City and look down at the Bronx? I'm afraid that neighborhood that I live in 10 years will not be there anymore. When I came, we had the arena in Montgomery Wards, So, Mr. Paul, you're in our ward. I don't know if you can help us out. But should we have the conversation on what did we do here? How do we fix it? Is this a bigger mess than, is it out of control? I think it is, and I think it's too late. Because if you have these rental, and they're party houses, they're empty. I walk the neighborhood a lot, and there's nobody in these places. If I receive an acceptable offer on my house, say some of these houses are doubling, tripling. Do I sell? What do I do? I talk to, like I say, 2 or 3 of my neighbors, and they were outside drinking beer, of course, and I went over. I didn't drink any beer, but I was like, hey guys, I'm going to this meeting Tuesday night. And they said, well, if somebody offered me double or triple my house, he reached his pocket, gave him the keys. Here, Mary, take my keys and keep the furniture. We're leaving Ashwaubenon. And ironically, I was talking to someone across the street, and we both got the postcard in the mail at the same time. We want your property. We'll sell it. You don't have to paint it. You don't have to do this, that, or the next thing. And I'm sure everybody here knows what that's all about. So,
Okay, Mary, did you get all your points across?
I did.
We've got some more people, I'm sure, would like to talk. Thanks, Mary, appreciate your comments. Anybody else?
Good evening. Karen Carlson, 1161 Canterbury Road, Ward 5 and 6. I think mostly I am opposed to the changes as they're written today for a number of reasons. I read the purpose that you have up on the board as to why you're looking at this, and it's a generic purpose that you would have for anything you do in the village of Ashwaubenon. I don't think it's specific to this issue. I think we as residents need to be able to understand exactly why this is being considered. Why is this being considered for the village of Ashwaubenon? Is it a noise issue? Is it a violence issue? Is it an economic issue? And I don't think we have those answers. I think we deserve those answers. I think we deserve an economic study that says how much will we lose or gain by having these changes in place. When I look at statistically across the country, how much money municipalities are making because of short-term rentals, it's significant. When you look at municipalities the size of Ashwaubenon, you're talking about $5 million a year. Bigger cities, San Diego, $285 million a year. Now, granted, we're not that big. And I can guarantee you that those municipalities have the same issues that we probably have here, but they've found ways to address them. So I think it's super important for everyone in this community to understand exactly why we're considering this and what have we done to mitigate those issues in other ways. If it's a public safety issue, if it's a noise issue, if it's a violent crime issue, it's a domestic or a property damage issue, what can we do in other ways to address those issues? And then if it's an economic issue, then what are we losing? I live in a community, I am not a short-term rental property owner. I've owned my house for 28 years. I've paid taxes to the village of Ashwaubenon for all 28 of those years. And I'll be honest, have we thought about when we're ready to retire and be snowbirds, what would we do in the winter? We'd want to rent it. This significantly impacts my future and my livelihood once I'm retired. I know that several years ago, you looked at taxing when people were renting out cars or parking cars in their driveways, right, and their yards, and that changed. This isn't much different than that. I understand that you want to limit the number of corporations that buy up homes and do this kind of rental property situation, but I think there's a different way to address that and still let those of us that have been paying taxes for 28, 30, 50 years, for those of us that are in that situation to have the future that we had hoped for. Lastly, I'm in a community that does have a lot of short-term rentals. We don't experience the problems that we hear about. The properties where we're at, they're pretty well managed. We don't have noise complaints. We don't have property damage complaints. We have tons of people that walk through our neighborhood every Packer game, and it's not a problem for us. So I do think there are ways to look at the core issues and look at mitigating those core issues instead of taking drastic measures. So that's all I have.
All right, thank you. Okay, I got time for one more in this session here.
My name is Pat Krzanek. I live on 1166 Blue Ridge Drive.
So if anybody lives anywhere near some of those rentals, we do. I see nothing wrong with them. They're probably the best houses on the block. I know you're scared because you're worried about taking single family and you're worried about duplexes disappeared, but nobody ever said anything to the Packers when they tore everything down on the south side in Brookwood. Nobody said nothing. Now you come back and say, it's not gonna work. I think step on the Packers' toes a little bit. I wake up every morning for a cup of coffee and I gotta look at that mess on the north side. It's not good. Leave it the way it is. These people are good people. I don't know about the guy that lives next to your house or anything else, but I know most of those owners on Blue Ridge. And they're probably the best people you're gonna ever come across.
Okay.
So leave them alone.
All right, thank you. Okay, we took care of the complaint then. Anybody here that is interested in speaking for the proposal? We've had a bunch of them at the last meeting. I think they all said their thing. Okay, if there's not, oh, we got somebody?
Hi, my name is Denise Adamczyk. I live at 1166 Canterbury Road, right in the Packer District. And I too, my family, years back when this whole Packer District started, we had children. So we were using our house upstairs in the basement, and now we're to a point, our kids are graduated out of the house, graduating from college, and we too are looking at the potential. We don't currently rent, but we were looking at the opportunity to rent our basement, put in an egress window. We have a basement bedroom, not classified as a bedroom right now, but we were looking to put an egress window in and possibly rent, not half a year, just, a handful of nights potentially, so that we could earn some money to maybe pay our taxes, and when we go south for a month or two during winter, that we would have a little income coming in. And I guess it's just disheartening from our standpoint. We've been in our house 30 years this past February, and we've paid our taxes every year. We've been on time with all of our bills for the, for the village and everything, and it's just disheartening that we can't look forward to that this would be discontinued. And as Karen said, it's just, there's other avenues I think we can potentially look at to see how we can remedy this so that it's a win-win for everyone. And Mr. Rice, I understand what you were saying about your neighbor 2 doors down, and I'm sorry that happened to you, but it sounds to me like it was the owner who's the issue, not even his renters. So well, that's not what you said, so I'm sorry, maybe I misunderstood, but I understood you to say that it was when the owner comes that it's the issue. So, there are good and there are bad, and so we have to find a way to work that out. There does seem to be a lot of hotels and things, and I don't know, maybe the hotels are driving some of this because they want the business. They don't want the residents to have a little bit of business. I don't know. I guess I'm for continuing as it is today.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, one more time. Anybody else?
My name is Gary Steinbrecher. I own a property along with my brother at 2203 Gilson Court. And I guess a couple topics. One thing is that's been brought up in this meeting and last meeting, and they keep on referring to everything as party houses. And I take offense to that because we sort of run a very good business. It's an, a short-term rental, but it's not a party house. It's a mile from Lambeau. It's not right there in the heart of it all, but it's a viable business that we use. People come in, during the year for weddings, funerals, you name it, for work and everything. It does get used during the season like everybody else's, but you can't live off of that. That's, if you're gonna use your property for a short-term rental, you have to utilize it all, not all year round, but during the whole year, not just the Packers season. So it's used for many things. So I sort of take offense to the party house, because that's not what ours is. It's used for many things and not just that. The other topic is they brought up about losing the neighborhoods, and sort of like this other gentleman brought up is the Packers have been the biggest culprits of that, taking down a couple neighborhoods. I know I lived right next to Lambeau. They bought my house, they tore it down. It's a parking lot now. So a lot of houses have been bought up by the Packers. I don't know how many, 40-ish or so. And so there's part of the problem. It's, that if you're worried about, losing children and families, Packers are sort of part of this too. And so you got to also look at the people that are just trying to make a living, with these short-term rentals. And then the other part is about the nuisance calls. They bring up at times, all the problems. Well, to me, the only fair way to look at that is you have to pretty much take your nuisance calls that you have during a year span, divide that by the total number of calls that you have in your village for a year, and get a percentage. What is the percentage of calls that come into your police department for the short-term rentals? And that gives you an idea. Do you get 30 calls a year? Okay, if you only get 150 calls, that's a lot. If you get 1,500 calls in a year, well, then it's not that many. So that's, to me, the only way you can really evaluate what kind of problems you're getting from these properties, is to sort of look at the big picture and look at how big of a problem is this. And so that's all I got.
All right, thanks. I know the word party homes kind of affects people. As Joel mentioned, we call them short-term rentals. I like to call them event homes because they can be rented for other reasons than the Packers. So any other, I got a couple minutes. I could take one more, and that will shut it off then.
Hi, my name is Matt Licky, 2068 Wildwood Lane. I grew up in this house. I hung out with Terry's kids who used to live in the neighborhood till the Packers tore it down. My mom lived in this house by herself after us 3 kids who attended Ashwaubenon schools from kindergarten all the way through high school. She lived there alone. Ashwaubenon jacked up her taxes because it's next door to Lambeau Field. The Packers never bought her house out like they did my whole neighborhood I grew up in. So she moved out, and we partnered up and made it into a short-term rental just last September. It's been working out good. We have no complaints. All of our neighbors I grew up with, Randy Schultz, Karen next door, they all have my phone number. If there ever was a problem, I'd be the first person they would call. Never had any issues. I think one night, Friday night, someone parked in front of her mailbox, and she was worried she was going to get mail the next day. That's literally the only complaint we've ever had. The guests all have been very satisfied. The neighbors, we fixed up the house a little bit, put some money into it, and just had no complaints. And as far as school, Ashwaubenon, I want to point out my 3 kids all still go to Ashwaubenon School District. And I've talked to Ms. Kupch, who's a teacher in Ashwaubenon School District, and I know Ashwaubenon's really big on open enrollment. They take students from all different places. They try to, be open to other cities to keep the school growing. And, I think, that's a good thing to keep the schools full. Ashwaubenon's a great school district. Everyone wants to be in Ashwaubenon. I know I want my kids in Ashwaubenon, and that's a good thing. So,
Okay, thanks, Matt. Okay, time to close the floor. Somebody want to make a motion?
I'll move to close the floor.
Second.
First and second, all in favor? Aye.
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 Opposed, motion carried. Okay. Where do we want to go?
Well, as much as I can appreciate all the great feedback, and thank you all very much, it does help us in making the decisions. It's a very, very difficult decision. I grew up right here in Ashwaubenon. As a matter of fact, Marriott was at 2107 Gasner is where I grew up. And this village has changed drastically, especially in those areas. You see no kids, houses are empty. It really doesn't paint a picture of a prospering village when all of your houses are sitting there empty. I'm going to tell you that it isn't the nuisance that's the problem, it's the neighborhoods, and the neighborhoods are no longer there. So the problem is moving forward, and part of the reason why Ashwaubenon School District is allowing all of the open enrollment is because they don't have enough students. It's part of it. So it's a difficult problem, and we have to somehow slow it down, or some neighborhoods are just going to be a rental area. It's just going to turn into basically blocks and blocks of just hotels. It's just going to be rentals. So when you ask about a purpose, that really was the purpose of this. And some of you that want to rent out your homes, that you spoke of, you're really not going to be even covered underneath this ordinance. You're still going to be able to rent out your homes if you want to rent them out for Packer games and make additional income in that. You're going to be able to still do that, because if you're doing it for less than 10 days, and we had people speaking last time and they're saying, yeah, we rented out for Packer games. That's fine. So, and again, the state has tied as
Pam, you had your chance to talk.
So I mean, the state has tied our hands. We had a district set up where we actually had ordinances to allow the short-term rentals, and it was controlled within that district. The problem is the state removed that from us. We don't have that ability anymore. We just don't have that. We can't do that by law. So we're trying to come up with a set of ordinances that is still going to allow people to be able to rent their properties as they wish, but at the same time not have empty houses all over Ashwaubenon. So the way I see this going forward, based on a lot of emails that received and people they talked to, is there's a lot of people out there who would like to see an ordinance that would do the 6 days.
You had your chance to talk.
I don't disagree, but you know why they aren't here? Because they're extremely intimidated, and I understand they should be here. It's even written in some of their emails. So I understand that you all want it the other way because you all want the investment part of it. But that's the key word in here. You're talking about investment. Whether it's your houses that you've invested in and now you want to rent them out and make the money on the back end, or you've actually purchased a house and you've invested in it and now you're renting it out because, yeah, it's very lucrative to do that. Very lucrative, even in a small little Green Bay as opposed to a San Diego or some other place. So I mean, Everybody's trying to find that way, but when you make an investment, there's always an inherent risk with an investment. And yes, there's that risk that the environment might change in your investment and you can't make that return. That's then all up to the investor to determine whether that investment is still viable for him or not. Part of the reason why the houses in Ashwaubenon cost so much now is because of that demand. That demand for people to be able to buy these houses because they can make such a profit on them by renting them out. So some of you have asked kind of what was the driving force behind it. That's kind of what was the driving force, is we've been getting complaints about the people not having a neighborhood anymore. People on Watermelon saying, my neighborhood's gone. I don't have a neighborhood anymore. So I feel putting in the 6 days is fair. I think it's something that we as a village need to do going forward. I also think that it's fair that we give short-term rental license properties right now the ability to be able to figure this out for 1 year so that it would not go into effect for them until July 1st of 2024. I think the reporting is a helpful thing so that the staff can, follow up and be able to control short-term rentals. I also think all of the control of it and the enforcement of the ordinances for people to be able to turn in complaints and that is also important, though I don't feel that is the most important issue, is the nuisance part of it. I feel that it is a changing of the village as a whole that is going to, in the long term, hurt the village, because no longer are you going to have residents in the village. You're just going to have people that are owning residence and nobody living here. So at this particular meeting, we are putting together what we proposed from our committee, and then it will move forward to the village board for the actual approval. So we state tonight, and the way that we devise this is not that's the approved amendment or the ordinance. That's what will go forward to the village board, and that's where it will be approved. So I would make a motion.
Jay, can I just butt in? Now, just to let you know, when somebody brings the proposal up, what's going to go to the staff first to rewrite what we are proposing. It'll be done there first before it's brought to the village board. The village board will get it, and we will discuss it there again. There will be a public hearing before am I correct, Joel?
That is correct.
Before in the village board meeting. And that'll be opened up to the floor like it is tonight, too. So if you have something you'd like to propose.
I have a question first.
Go ahead.
For the people who want to rent their property so they can go south for the winter or whatever, does this ordinance even apply to them? Isn't there a separate ordinance that handles long-term rentals? This is just for short-term rentals, right? Or would it apply?
Well, it would, if I'm understanding the question correctly, let's say they wanted to go away for a week and they want to rent their house conversely to the week that they're going to be gone on that vacation, right? And they're not going to rent their home out for more than 10 nights. This would not apply to them because they would not be required to be licensed by the village of Ashwaubenon. There was an individual that did speak in regards to maybe becoming snowbirds and maybe going down
Yeah,
south
that's
for
what I
2-3 months to that regard. If they are renting their home out to an individual for more than 29 days, that does not apply to the short-term rental ordinance. That's a different provision. So
So this doesn't even apply to those people.
it doesn't apply to that. Now, if they were going to rent it out to multiple parties, multiple individuals for 6 consecutive nights, and that was it, and there would be a different rental every week or every couple weeks, then that would apply to the short-term rental, and the licensing would be applicable. One of the alternatives that we did present tonight is the opportunity to incorporate an exemption to the 6-night minimum if that home is viewed and been licensed as owner occupied. So that often happens, especially with snowbirds. They may be going down to Florida or Arizona for 2-3 months at a time. They're not going to change their primary residence while they're gone. They'll still vote in Wisconsin. They'll still have their driver's license issued to that address. That address here would be considered their primary address. And so they would, if that were to be incorporated into the proposed amendment, that would exempt them from that 6-night minimum, and they could continue to rent it for 2 or 3 nights at a time. If that, hopefully I answered your question.
Any other questions? Joe?
Good. All right, so I am going to make a motion to accept this ordinance with the 6-night consecutive night minimum for single-family and 2-family homes, and also with the exemption that all short-term rentals, exempting out those rentals right now, the license holders, until July 1st of 2024. Also would include the owner-occupied dwellings that have been approved and licensed under the section of Community Development Department. That would also be an exemption to the 6-night minimum if they are owner-occupied. We would additionally include the changes to the code around voltages, gauges, outdoors, crawl spaces, and then include the reporting requirement.
For staff clarification, the exemption on the owner-occupied component of the ordinance, that would be for current and new licensees, or would it be only for those that are?
It would be for current and new licensees.
Okay, thank you.
So that's my motion.
That's what you're going to propose?
That's what I just proposed.
Okay, I've got a first. Somebody want to second it?
I'll second it.
All right, we've got a first and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Okay,
And I'd actually like to add some more info too, that kind of going along with what some of what Jay said is the concern, obviously too, about the limited housing stock. But I also too took some time to look up some of just the publicly available information through Brown County and the Wisconsin Department of Financial Information. I looked up at least 30 of these LLCs that own houses around Lambeau. None of them live in Ashwaubenon. Maybe there's a couple still that do, but when you can look up the agents for them, but none of them were Ashwaubenon based when I was looking through. So a lot of these people are just worried about their investment and how the Packers do it, and not necessarily where the village goes with it. But I do think that there is definitely a place for short-term rentals. I mean, it's a great way to experience a different area or to get a different experience when you're visiting an area. But the state left us little choice on how to monitor these. So everyone that does own these rentals, contact your state representatives. And with enough people being located around the state that own these houses, you'll have a lot of the state representatives covered, and tell them to get this changed to allow more local control on how to manage these. That's the reason why I ended up voting the way I did for this.
That's a good point, because we considered, put a pin in Lambeau and draw a circle around it, and in this area, this will be the short-term rental area. You can't do that. The state won't allow you to do that. Then we considered, let's treat it like liquor licenses, where you can only have so many short-term rentals per your population. Can't do that. State won't allow you to do that. So we're trying to balance the interests of the people trying to use their property as a short-term rental against the interests of the people who want to live in their home and have it be the neighborhood with the young families with school-aged children. It's tough to do, but we're doing our best. The 6-day limit was the best way we could think of to require these properties to have a license, because once you have the license, then there's teeth that we can use to, if you have 3 complaints, you lose your license, or something along that line. That's the reasoning.
Okay, anybody else got a comment? One question.
Okay, so my question is, and I understand where you're going with what we just did, but.
We need your name and.
Yeah, Gary, if you.
We'd have to open the floor again.
Hold on, Gary, please. If you could just maintain decorum in your meeting.
The floor is not open.
Correct, so if you could suspend the
The
rules.
floor is not open.
Yeah, if you would like to entertain the question, you're welcome to do that, but I would suggest the committee's.
We had this open before. I do not want.
Yeah, and if you can open it again if you'd like, you can open it again if you'd like. And then if you do open the floor, to suspend the rules to open the floor, if he could come to the microphone just for the record. But that's your discretion as to whether or not you want to open the floor.
We will have that opportunity at the board meeting when it gets to the board.
Yeah.
Everybody had their chance to talk now.
Yeah.
So, okay. We have a motion and a second, and it's been in favor to pass it on to the staff, like I said, so that'll end that one. Anything needed for the next agenda, bring it to the staff. Will be on the agenda. That's all we got here, so I'll take a motion to adjourn the meeting.
So moved.
First, second, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, motion carried. Thank you very much.